Okay, so at FantasyCon, they had a panel on why there were so many Mormon sci-fi fantasy authors, and lots of opinions were put out there. And since you tend to think about kind of trends and things like that, I wondered what your take was.
What is my take on why are there so many Mormon science fiction fantasy writers? Successful ones. Why are there so many? So we all have our own theories. It's funny, this is like my first visit to my publisher in New York. One of the editors there asked me that very question. They're like, what's going on out there, right? And I've had a lot of time to think about it. I've got a couple of answers. And these are just my armchair answers. Looking at myself, like I grew up in Nebraska.
He's doing
and Nebraska's here. Hey! You guys bring me some roses? No? So I grew up in Nebraska. So it wasn't like I was really immersed in Utah culture and things, but I did notice when Tracy Hickman, and when the fantasy books I was reading, that one was written by Tracy Hickman, and he had in like the back, he used LDS, and then Orson Scott Card's books. And I thought, wow, these are people like me, and they are doing this. I think the early success of Scott Card and Tracy Hickman and some of these people was a big deal for those of us who were like, oh, this is something that I can legitimately do. I also think that science fiction fantasy was a safe counterculture. Meaning, you know, for me in the 80s, you know, big countercultures were big, 60s, 70s, 80s, they still are, of course. You know, you got this punk and all of this stuff, and, you know, all my friends were smoking pot and all of this stuff, and, you know, you want to rebel against your parents, right? But at the same time, you're like a good kid. You're like, I don't want to rebel. And so when I got into sci-fi fantasy and they didn't give it at all, I'm like, I found it, right? I can rebel against my parents by playing Dungeons and Dragons, right? This is my grand rebellion.
I found my uncle's copies of like the original
my mother heard all this
Dungeons
stuff about Dungeons and Dragons, and to her credit, she came and just like watched us. And since there was like there was actually a girl in our group. Afterward, I asked her, she's like, you were actually hanging out with members of the opposite gender, talking to people, instead of just hiding and playing video games like you always do? I thought it was awesome. But she didn't tell us that. If I had known she thought it was awesome, it might have been back. She's always like, oh, role play. So I think that's part of it. So early successes, safe counterculture, and then there's kind of focus on literacy and reading in the community without kind of like, for some reason, and I think you can blame Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. The community is not as scared of fantasy as some other religious communities are. You find a lot of Jews in publishing and in science fiction and fantasy too, and I think for some of the same reasons that the community, the religion is not quite as frightened of these things for whatever reason, and so with the focus on literacy, you end up, I think, with writers of a lot of different styles. So that's my long sort of three-part take on it. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but there you go. Oh, thanks.
I heard you say Jews.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. Right, this one's working. Is it only great shells that have gem hearts, or do all crustaceans on Roshar have some gem inside? And if it is only great shells, then are there unique decay strain related to that fact?
So they are not only great shells, but not every crustacean
So basically
has
on the book
a
he's
gem
reading,
heart, at least
it's
not of the style that would be of relevance to you. Some have the same sort of chemistry going on in the body, which is too small for it to go as a gem heart.
One country has chicken.
And the gem heart is related to how particularly the great shells can get so big.
So the great shells are
like, go ahead.
Massive spider crabs.
That question seemed like a parody question.
Oh,
It was a legit question.
Do I have any phobias that get in the way of my writing? I don't really have any to that strength. I do think spiders are creepy. They're more creepy in a find something to smash them with sort of way. But I think the only time I really felt like a deep, like phobic fear is the first time I went snorkeling and was going along and everything's great, and then I turned and looked to where the shelf ended, and I got close to it and I looked down and out to the nothing, and there was that moment of just that thing is so much vaster and bigger than me that I think I felt that same, like, that was like I am going nowhere near that. I am coming back, right? And it creeped me out the rest of that snorkeling trip.
Okay, I just read The Arithmetist,
Oh.
which I have had for a while and
Chalk-based
just never
magic.
cracked open.
Use
And
in
oh my
geometry.
gosh, when is Arithmetist 2 coming out?
So,
The shop
Arithmetist
drawings
2
come
is
to
the
life.
number one requested book from the people asking me. I know more people are waiting for Stormlight 3, but they can see the progress bars and things like that, so they know it's coming. Arithmetist 2, I'm planning to write between Stormlight 3 and 4. I tried to write it, and since they were going to South America and I had not done my research and things, I was not able to accurately represent an alternate Earth version of the cultures, like the Nahuatl, like the Mexican people and things like that. So I had to stop and read like 10 books on that, which prevented me from writing the book at that point. Now that I've done the research, I feel write the book and do justice to it, but I have to now find the time slot in my schedule. Because the slot that was in my schedule, I spent doing research. You wouldn't have wanted the book that would have come out if I hadn't done that research. You know all this buzz about Harry Potter and Native Americans? Mine would have been 10 times worse, just because you write from a position of ignorance. So I was started and I'm like, no, I can't do this. So now I think I can do it and it'll be good, but now I have to find the time. I'm sorry. It is going to come eventually.
Good job, Brandon.
Okay.
I wanted something that would last me 2 weeks, so my librarian gave me Way of Kings as the first book of yours to read.
Okay.
And I tried
It's
really,
impossible.
really hard to read it. So what do you recommend I should try instead?
So here's the thing. Now don't feel embarrassed by this. The Way of Kings is never the book I give to people first. The Way of Kings is the book for people who already trust me, because it takes to about chapter 11 before the book works. And that, you get payoff for that, right? You get payoff for that, but I never give it to people first. I either pick Mistborn, and that is what I would recommend to you because it is a self-contained story, it's going a bit faster, it has a lot of the things I do very well, but it also doesn't demand as much of you up front. Once you've read the Mistborn trilogy and you trust me, I think if you come back to Way of Kings later, it will work for you, but you gotta trust me first. So try Mistborn. The other option would be The Arithmetist, which was just mentioned, which is also going to have a little bit more of a streamlined plot than Way of Kings. Okay. Is this Magica that you're doing? Yeah.
All right.
Brandon plays together and like religious
So, if you get the character that in the first book everyone slanders because he's a rascal. But he's not really a rascal in the first book. You slowly start to turn him into a rascal throughout book 2, revealing what he's done in his past, and in book 3 he's a downright rascal. Thought you were going to kill him off for a minute there. But I wanted to know what your progression of that character was, as well as the progression for the world, because book 1 of the Alloy of Law isn't particularly gritty. But in book 3, you've gone a lot more gritty and explicit in your content.
See, okay, I would argue that book 2 is the grittiest of the 3, personally. It's hard for me to talk about this one just because I wrote Alloy of Law as an experiment to see if I liked it. And then I sat down and built a trilogy about those characters. So you can almost imagine that Alloy of Law is a standalone, and the next 3 are a trilogy about those characters. And I don't know that I made any specific decisions in any way. I just said, what is the story I want to tell about these characters with these 3 books? And then I took them and I dug into them. And I felt like I hadn't dug into them deeply enough in Alloy of Law to really who they were. It was, again, kind of done more as a free writing experiment than an intentional novel, even though I did have an outline and things for it. The books 2, 3, and 4, which form a trilogy, have a distinct outline. Any changes are changes kind of focused on that idea, that I took something that was kind of like a seed for a trilogy and then built a trilogy around it. I didn't make any specific determination that I was going to be more gritty. I do think the second book is grittier because of the difference between hunting a group of bank robbers versus a serial killer. That's going to have some natural move toward that, but it's not any specific intent. That said, reader response is kind of how you decide on these things. I just kind of write the books as I feel they need to be, and what you get out of them is certainly valid. Mm-hmm. All right, 5 minutes? Okay. So we're just going to go, the reading was long, so we're just going to end off with the Q&A. So we'll do 5 minutes. We'll just do these questions here. So go ahead.
So as a writer of so many books simultaneously, what is your crazy sleep schedule like, and how do you manage your time?
So my crazy sleep schedule is not as crazy as you think. It is a little crazy. I go to bed at 4 and I get up at noon. I did not become a writer so that I could keep like the job a working stiff would have. My writing schedule is generally I do one big block from about noon until 5. I hang out with my kids and my wife from about 5 until 10. And then from about 10 until 2 or 3, I do another writing block. And then I take an hour or 2 off and play video games or something like that. The secret to my productivity is not much of a secret. It is that I work every day. I just get up and I write. And I don't always publish what I write. Some of what I write doesn't work. But I like writing. I like telling stories. The creative process is really, really engaging to me. It's what I like doing. And so I do it every day. And I'm not a very fast writer. I'm just really consistent at my writing. All right.
Got a question for you. Could you theoretically use Hemlergy to steal search finding?
Yes, you could use Hemlergy to steal search finding. Yep, totally possible.
We already have that answer.
Ooh, you should be scared of that. That's it. Oh dear. Oh dear. Yep.
Okay, so I know you've had a lot of questions about certain people living on Roshar and how they're living on Roshar. Could they also do that if they were to travel to Scadrial?
Scadrial would be a lot harder because getting the investiture out of things in Scadrial is tough. Like there are ways you can do it, but it would be much more difficult.
And does that have to do with the investiture being more directed?
Yeah, kind of. It's the genetic component is a big part of it. The directed component, like in Roshar, it's just flung around all over the place. Like for instance, if he could get to a shard pool, he could feed off that. But then he's at the shard pool, and that's kind of dangerous and things. So Roshar is really the easiest place in the Cosmere for him to consistently get this sort of stuff. Taldane would not be bad either. That's the White Sand world, but it is inaccessible currently in the Cosmere. Yeah. All right.
Hello. My question isn't actually universe-based. It's about an element of your writing. You continue a proud tradition of fantasy writers being very descriptive about food and feast scenes, and we haven't heard of this reading. How do you approach that? How do you create that sense of realism and multi-sensual experience?
So, I had a professor at college at BYU who was a folklorist specializing in food lore. She was very helpful in this. One of the reasons I think that a lot of the professionals, and I certainly do not do George R. R. Martin levels of it, is because food lore is actually really important in our societies, but it's one of those ones we forget very easily when developing a fantasy world. It's part of what makes fantasy worlds when you don't do some of these things. Not saying every book has to, but it's one of it that's kind of on the smaller list of these things make it feel actually real rather than imitation real. Because we have so much of this food lore, and food is so much involved. I mean, everyone has to eat every day multiple times, so we're going to have all this lore and things, and you just skip all that, it starts to feel like, you know, like the cardboard cutout fake city built for a movie set or something like that instead of a real lived-in world. And I happen to like food. Probably something that George and I share, so you end up with food stuff in the books. All right, we're going to do 2 more questions right here.
Okay, so real quick, I love you.
Oh, thank you.
Second, I stopped writing and write a Wayne book.
Okay, write a Wayne book. Okay. There is one more LA era book that will have some Wayne in it.
I should keep Wayne. I got my permission.
Mm-hmm.
Kelsier.
Yes.
My favorite will always be, I love him. He's the dad I wish I had, even though I love my dad.
Right. Try to give no spoilers in this comment.
Oh, no. Who would you have Kelsier play?
Literally the
worst. In the film?
Right now, my choice would be Michael Fassbender. But I don't get to choose that, but that would be my choice. And the screenplay pitch that we have out says, a Michael Fassbender-like character. So hopefully that other people do that. Okay, last question.
This is actually a bit about actors and about Wayne. when I read Ally of Law, in my head, Wayne was Simon Pegg.
Yeah.
And so then I saw you recently describe him.
Yeah, Simon Pegg.
So was that in your head?
No, but when I was working on the newer books, I'm like, oh, Simon Pegg would be a great actor for this. The first times I wrote him, I didn't imagine Simon Pegg, but it was an after the fact, kind of like Marcel Fassbender. I'm like, this is the type of actor I would like in this role. All right, guys, that is my time. Thank you very much.